I promised my granddaughter, fresh out of cancer treatment, a peaceful weekend on my yacht. But when we reached the dock, a woman from my HOA had taken it over for a party, telling me my private slip was now community property as my granddaughter cried. She thought her fake rules gave her all the power. She had no idea I owned a secret that would let me take back everything, starting with the land beneath her feet. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe homeowners deserve to be safe on their own property, hit subscribe because you are not going to want to miss the moment this fake queen gets dethroned. The salt air tasted like freedom. For the first time in 6 months, my granddaughter Ellie's hand in mine felt steady, not frail. The doctors had used words like remission and full recovery, but the real medicine was right here. The familiar scent of brine and creosote, the gentle rock of the floating docks, and the sight of the Resolute waiting for us at the end of the pier. Her polished mahogany hull gleamed in the afternoon sun. We'd spent years restoring her, my late wife and I, and the boat was as much a part of our family as the house we lived in. This trip wasn't just a weekend cruise. It was a promise kept. A promise that after all the sterile rooms and whispered worries, there would be sunshine and open water again. Ellie's small suitcase filled with coloring books and a new sun hat bumped against my leg. She looked up at me, her smile so bright it almost hurt to look at. "Are we going to see dolphins, Grandpa?" I squeezed her hand. "I've got a good feeling about it, kiddo." But the good feeling vanished the second we turned the final corner of the dock. There were people on my boat. Strangers, at least 24 of them, moving back and forth, carrying silver trays and folding chairs. A man in a stained white apron was wiping down the teak deck with a dirty rag, leaving streaks. My jaw tightened. A woman with a tight blonde bun and a clipboard was standing at the gangplank, directing traffic like a drill sergeant. She wore a bright pink blazer that seemed to scream for attention. No, the beverage station goes over there," she barked, pointing a sharp red-nailed finger toward the helm. "And someone get these empty boxes off the dock before guest trips." That's when I recognized her. Karen Stiles, the HOA vice president. We'd never spoken, but I'd seen her emails, long rambling manifestos about recycling bin placement and unauthorized lawn ornamentation. She looked up and saw us, her expression shifting from irritation to outright annoyance. She didn't see a homeowner. She saw an interruption. I put a gentle hand on Ellie's shoulder, trying to shield her from the tension that was suddenly thick enough to cut with a knife. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice level. "I think there's been a mistake. This is my boat." Karen glanced down at her clipboard, then back at me, a smirk playing on her lips. "Jack Mullally, right? Slip 12. No mistake. We have the Resolute reserved for the HOA community celebration. It's for the board members and their distinguished guests." She said distinguished guests with theatrical flair as if she were hosting the Queen of England. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Reserved. Nobody asked me. Nobody told me. This is a private vessel on a private dock. I felt Ellie shrink behind me. Karen let out a long theatrical sigh, the kind you use on a toddler who just doesn't get it. It was all handled through the property manager, Mr. Mullally. Approved and finalized at last month's board meeting. It's a community event, and since the marina is common access, we have the right to utilize community assets. My boat was now a community asset. I looked past her and saw a caterer setting up a portable sound system right next to the compass my father gave me. They'd already draped a cheap vinyl banner with the HOA logo across the railing my wife had spent a month sanding and varnishing by hand. And then I heard it. A small, choked sob. Ellie's face was crumpling. The joy from moments ago had been replaced with fear and confusion. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Who are all these people?" That was it. The snap of a rope under too much strain. Every protective instinct in my body roared to life. But decades in the Coast Guard taught me one thing. You don't show panic in a storm, and you don't show rage in front of a child. I knelt down, turning Ellie away from the scene. "Hey, it's okay," I said softly, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "Looks like there's been a little mix-up with the party planners. Why don't we go get an ice cream and I'll sort this out?" Her little nod was all the permission I needed. I walked her back to the parking lot, my heart pounding with a cold, controlled fury. She didn't say a word the whole way. She just clutched my hand, her knuckles white. After I got her settled in the car with the radio on, I marched back to the dock. The anger was a physical thing now, a hot pressure behind my eyes. Karen was still there, clipboard in hand. "Look," I said, my voice low and hard. "I don't know what kind of fantasy you're living in, but this party is over. Get these people off my boat now." She laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was sharp and condescending. "I don't think so. This is an official HOA function. It's all in the covenants, fully authorized. You'd know that if you ever bothered to show up for a meeting." She tapped her clipboard for emphasis. "This marina belongs to the community." My mind raced. Common access. I'd built this complex 18 years ago. I designed the marina, dredged the channel, and sold the residential units. The marina slips were deeded private property, just like the apartment balconies. She was lying. She had to be. But arguing with a brick wall wasn't going to get me anywhere. I spent the rest of the night on the phone trying to reach anyone, with a shred of authority. The property management company's emergency line went to an answering service in another state. The HOA president, a retired dentist I'd met once, didn't answer his phone. It was clear they were all hiding, letting Karen take the lead. The next morning, I finally got Donna Chong, the property manager, on the phone. Her voice was smooth and professional, coated in a thick layer of corporate indifference. "Yes, Mr. Mullally," she said, her tone perfectly placid. "I understand your concern. However, Vice President Stiles did file the appropriate paperwork for a community event." She cited the amended covenants regarding common area usage. "I asked to see these amended covenants. She promised to email them, but they never arrived. I asked her who exactly owned the land the marina was built on." There was a brief pause on the line. "The ownership structure is complex," she finally said, "but operational control falls to the homeowners association." It was a masterclass in saying nothing. Later that afternoon, I saw Karen walking from the clubhouse looking smug. I walked over, determined to get a straight answer. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something far more dangerous. I was focused. "Karen," I said, stopping her near the mailboxes, "I have one question for you. Who owns my marina slip?" She didn't even break her stride. She just gave me that same dismissive smirk from the day before. "It doesn't matter who owns it," she said, her voice dripping with poison. "We control the access now. You should really read the new rules." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there. That Sunday, I walked back down to my dock. The party was over. My boat was still there, but it felt violated. There were wine stains on the deck, greasy fingerprints on the galley counters, and a faint smell of cheap perfume in the cabin. They've left trash bags piled on the pier. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the water, feeling the gentle rocking of the dock beneath my feet. As I wiped their wine stains from the teak, I thought of Ellie's tears. This wasn't just a mess. It was a violation of the sanctuary she needed. She didn't just use my boat. She stole it from my granddaughter's weekend, from her healing. The quiet of the marina settled around me, but inside a storm was brewing. I looked at the Resolute, a vessel built for weathering any sea, and made a silent vow. But fighting her on her terms was a losing game. I needed to change the battlefield entirely, and I knew just where to find the map. 18 years ago, this whole place was just a muddy plot of land and a blueprint on my kitchen table. I'd poured my Coast Guard pension and every ounce of my sweat into creating this little community. A block of solid, no-nonsense apartments, a row of secure storage units, and my pride and joy, the private marina. After my wife passed, managing the day-to-day became too much. The paperwork, the tenant calls, it was a constant reminder she wasn't there to share the load. So I did what seemed sensible at the time. I leased the management of the residential side to a third-party company, a firm that specialized in homeowners associations. I kept ownership of the land itself, and the marina was always mine separate. The agreement was clear. They would manage the tenants. I would maintain the property. It worked for a while. I became just another resident, the quiet old guy with the boat at the end of the dock. That was my mistake. I got too quiet. My first inkling that Karen's party wasn't a one-time thing came a few days later. Mike Travers, an electrician who'd lived in the complex since day one, stopped me by the gate. He's a good man, a Gulf War vet who doesn't say much, but sees everything. "Captain," he said, nodding toward the marina. "You know that pink blazer lady has been running something down here almost every weekend. Yoga classes, book clubs, you name it. Had a security guy in tactical pants telling kids they couldn't fish here last Saturday. The security guy he was talking about was Brad Kessler, a power-drunk HOA volunteer who failed the police academy and now spent his days writing bogus citations." The pieces started clicking into place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a hostile takeover happening right under my nose. I started digging. I pulled the security footage from the cameras overlooking the marina, the ones I'd installed myself years ago. There it was in crisp color video. Karen hosting a gaudy Tupperware party on someone else's sailboat. Karen leading a sunset yoga class on the main pier, blocking access for actual boat owners. Brad, her lap dog, pacing the docks like a prison guard. My insurance agent called that afternoon. A claim had been flagged. Someone had slipped during one of the unauthorized yoga sessions and was threatening to sue the property. My premiums were about to go through the roof because of liability I never even knew I had. I called Donna Chang at the management company again, this time with a harder edge in my voice. I told her I had video evidence of multiple unauthorized events and a pending insurance issue. I demanded to see the board meeting minutes where this common access rule was supposedly passed. Her professional calm finally cracked. "Mr. Mullally, I assure you, Miss Stiles followed procedure," she insisted, but her voice was strained. An hour later, a PDF landed in my inbox. The meeting minutes were a joke. It was a single, sloppily typed page. The date of the meeting was listed as a Sunday afternoon, and the attendees listed for the quorum were Karen Stiles, and one other name I recognized as her closest friend in the complex. The vote to reclassify marina common areas for community recreational use was recorded as unanimous. 2 people, that was their quorum. 2 people had voted to seize control of a multi-million-dollar private marina. There was no record of other owners being notified, no agenda posted, no period for discussion. It was fraud, plain and simple, but wrapped in just enough cheap bureaucratic paper to look legitimate to a lazy eye. I forwarded the document to the HOA president. He replied with a one-sentence email, delegated to management. They were all washing their hands of it, leaving Karen with the keys to the kingdom. That night, my daughter came over for dinner. She saw the stacks of papers on my table, the worried look in my eyes. She knew something was wrong. I explained everything. The boat, Karen, the fake meeting minutes. Her face grew pale. "Dad, just sell it," she pleaded, her voice thick with worry. "Please sell the whole complex. You don't need the stress. Your health is more important than a piece of property. She's not worth it." I looked at her, at the daughter I'd raised to stand up for what's right. And I saw the toll the last year had taken on her too. She was afraid of another fight, another hospital, another loss. Part of me wanted to agree, to just cash out and sail away from it all. But then I thought of Ellie's face when she saw strangers on our boat. I thought of my friend Mike being hassled by a wannabe cop. I thought of my wife and the pride she had in what we built here. Selling wasn't running away from a problem. It was letting the problem win. It was letting a bully like Karen tear down years of hard work out of pure spite and ego. After my daughter left, I walked into my study and knelt before the old fireproof safe tucked away in the closet. The heavy steel door swung open with a familiar, satisfying click. Inside, beneath old photographs and service medals, was a thick leather folio. I pulled it out and laid it on my desk. The pages were heavy, the ink still dark and official. There it was, the original county file deed for the entire parcel of land in my name. And tucked inside it, the master lease agreement signed with the management company 18 years ago. An agreement that laid out their duties, their limits, and my ultimate authority as the landowner. The truth was buried in an 18-year-old trust. A clause so powerful, so absolute, it made every rule Karen ever waved in my face completely meaningless. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the ground landlord, and they had forgotten to pay their rent. That's the thing, I said to the empty room, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. I still on the land under her feet. My first move wasn't a cannonball. It was a carefully aimed rifle shot. I drafted 3 letters. One for Karen, one for the HOA board president, and one for Donna Chang at the management company. They were identical, simple, clear, and quoting the specific clauses from the 18-year-old master lease agreement that guaranteed my sole ownership and control of the marina. I pointed out their breach of contract, the liability they'd exposed me to, and a formal demand to cease and desist all unauthorized use of my property. I sent them via certified mail. Return receipt requested. It was the proper legal way to do things. It was also like throwing a pebble at a charging rhino. Karen didn't see a legal notice. She saw a challenge to her throne, and she went on the attack. Within 48 hours, brightly colored flyers appeared on every community bulletin board. In big bold letters, they read, "Concerned residents, are you safe? Local property owner Jack Mullally has issued threats against your HOA board members. Do not approach." It was libel, pure and simple. My photo, a grainy image pulled from an old community newsletter, was plastered right in the middle. The same day, my emails to the board and management companies started bouncing back. Blocked. I was being cut off from all official channels of communication. The real escalation came that Friday. I was walking down to the docks for a routine check when I saw it. 2 empty slips. The boats belonging to the Miller and Rodriguez families were gone. In their place were bright orange notices zip-tied to the pilings, declaring the vessels had been towed for non-compliance with marina aesthetic standards. The Millers had a small inflatable dinghy tied to their stern. The Rodriguezes had a flag from their son's university hanging from their mast. That was it. These were families I'd known for over a decade. I called Mr. Miller. He was beside himself. The towing and impound fees were over $2,000. He tried to reason with Karen, and she told him rules are rules. Maybe next time you'll respect the community you live in. She was using other people's property, their money, to punish me. Fear started to creep through the community. Neighbors who used to wave and stop to chat now just gave me a quick nervous nod and hurried past. They were afraid of being next. Karen was making an example of anyone who might be seen as my ally. The ugliest moment came when she targeted Bill Anderson, a Marine veteran in his late 70s who lived in one of the ground floor units. Bill flew an American flag from a small flagpole mounted to his patio railing, just as he had for the past 15 years. One morning, he found a citation taped to his door for an unauthorized structural modification. Mike Travers found out what happened next. He's wired into the community grapevine and has a knack for getting his hands on things people don't want seen. He showed me a forwarded email sent from Karen's account to another board member. The subject line was flag problem. The body of the email was just one sentence. Don't worry about the old soldier. I'll handle it. The rednecks are getting restless. Reading those words, the rednecks are getting restless, I felt a kind of cold, clarifying rage I hadn't felt since I was a young man in a uniform. This wasn't about a boat anymore. It wasn't even just about property rights. This was about decency. It was about a bully who got her kicks from tormenting good people. People like Bill, who had served their country with more honor than she could ever comprehend. The certified letters came back unopened. Refused, the post office stamp read. My rifle shot had missed. It was time to change my strategy. The next afternoon, I got a call from Eleanor Vance. She was the widow of my old Coast Guard crewmate, Tom. We had served together for 20 years. After Tom passed, I'd made sure she could keep his slip at the marina for a nominal fee. A promise between old friends. Her voice was thin, on the verge of tears. "Jack, they terminated my lease," she whispered. I got a letter. It said I violated the rules. Unauthorized guests. But it was just my son and his family visiting. Karen had kicked out a grieving widow to get at me. I went to see her. She was sitting in her small, neat living room, a framed photo of her and Tom on the mantelpiece. She held the crumpled termination letter in her hand. "Tom built that dock with you, Jack," she said, looking up at me, her eyes filled with a pain that had nothing to do with contracts or leases. He loved it here. It was the last piece of him I had left. I drove home in silence. My daughter had been right. This woman, this situation, was not worth my health if I tried to fight it on her terms. The paperwork, the rules, the meetings, it was all a rigged game. She owned the table, but she didn't own the building. That evening, I didn't go to the marina. I went to a small, quiet office downtown to meet with a real estate attorney I'd known for years. I laid out the situation, the original deeds, the master lease. He listened patiently, nodding. When I was finished, he leaned back in his chair. "So you want to sue the HOA for breach of contract?" He asked. "No," I said. "Suing is what they expect. It's slow, it's messy, and it keeps them in control while the lawyers get rich. I don't want to sue them. I want to buy them." He raised an eyebrow. I explained my idea. We weren't talking about a lawsuit. We were talking about a purchase option. We were talking about a quiet, legal, and absolutely devastating flanking maneuver. I left his office with a clear plan and a short list of phone calls to make. Back in my study, I picked up the phone. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call a board member. I called the main branch of the bank that held the mortgage on the entire residential complex. When the commercial loans officer picked up, my voice was steady and calm. "Good afternoon," I said. "I'm calling for a piece of information. I need to know the exact payoff amount on the HOA's master property loan. Here's the thing about power that people like Karen Stiles never understand. It's not about who makes the most noise. It's about who holds the deed." While she was busy making a spectacle of herself, terrorizing veterans and towing boats, I was quietly moving pieces on a much larger board. My secret wasn't just that I owned the land under the marina. It was bigger than that. When I originally developed the property, I'd structured it through a land trust. I retained a silent majority share in that trust, a detail buried so deep in the county records that no one, least of all a lazy HOA board, had ever bothered to look for it. It meant I wasn't just the landlord for the dirt under the docks. I was, in a quiet technical sense, the landlord for the entire property. The HOA didn't own their building. They were tenants paying a mortgage to the bank and paying a ground lease to a trust that I effectively controlled. They just didn't know it. My call to the bank confirmed exactly what I suspected. The HOA's loan was a headache for them. There had been late payments, compliance issues, and the risk profile was trending downward. When an offer came in to buy out the entire mortgage, they didn't just listen. They jumped at the chance. My lawyer made 2 calls. The first was to the bank that held the HOA's mortgage. We bought it. The second was to the county clerk. We terminated their lease. Just like that, the legal foundation of their power was gone. They just didn't know it yet. The offer didn't come from Jack Mullally. It came from a sterile-sounding entity called Tidewater Holdings, LLC. The transaction closed in less than 2 weeks. I was now through a cutout, the HOA's bank. Their mortgage payments, the very source of their financial authority, would now be coming to me. But I wasn't interested in being their banker for long. With the loan papers in my LLC's possession, my attorney filed a single powerful document with the county clerk, a termination of leasehold agreement. We cited a dozen different breaches of the original master lease. From unauthorized commercial activity in the marina to creating an unsafe, uninsured environment. We included sworn affidavits from the towed boat owners and copies of Karen's libelous flyers. The legal argument was airtight. Overnight, the HOA's contractual right to manage the property, including their imaginary control over my marina, was extinguished. It was like flipping a switch. One minute they had a lease, the next they didn't. All their bylaws, their covenants, their made-up rules, they were all built on a foundation of legal rights that no longer existed. Their power had simply vanished. The beauty of it was the silence. I didn't announce anything. I didn't send a triumphant email or put up a flyer of my own. I just let the official paperwork do its quiet work. The first sign that the tremors were being felt came a few days later. Mike Travers called me. "You're not going to believe this," he said, a note of amusement in his voice. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. She's screaming at people in the hallways. Something about an illegal corporate takeover. She's telling everyone some big shot developer is trying to steal our homes. She knew something had happened, but she couldn't figure out what. She was like a captain of a ship who feels the hull scrape against a reef, but can't see the rocks. She was panicked, flailing, and making more noise than ever. And in her panic, she did exactly what I knew she would do. She doubled down. She decided to throw a party to project strength and show everyone she was still in charge. She announced the first ever HOA Gala Night, a black tie event to be held at the Marina Clubhouse and along the main pier. It was a victory party for a war she thought she was winning. For her, it was the ultimate display of her authority. For me, it was the perfect stage. The evening of the gala, I didn't get dressed up. I went down to the marina about an hour before sunset, accompanied by Mike and a professional locksmith. We didn't make a scene. We just went to the main gate, the one Karen paraded through with her entourage every weekend, and got to work. We removed the old HI-installed lock. We replaced it with a heavy-duty marine-grade magnetic lock system wired directly into a power source I controlled. Mike, with his electrician skills, had the whole thing installed in under 30 minutes. It was beautiful, solid, quiet, and completely unreachable without the key card I held in my pocket. As the locksmith packed up his tools, I affixed a new sign to the gate. It was large, made of weatherproof aluminum with clean, professional lettering. It didn't mention the HOA. It didn't mention me. It just said private property. All access rights revoked. Trespassers will be prosecuted under Penal Code 602. It was simple, direct, and legally unambiguous. Then we waited. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. We heard them before we saw them. The chatter and laughter of a crowd, the clinking of glasses. Karen arrived at the head of a 50-person parade. She was wearing a sequined dress that shimmered under the dock lights, holding a glass of champagne. Her followers, all dressed in their best, trailed behind her, buzzing with excitement. She walked right up to the gate full of swagger and pushed. It didn't budge. She pushed again, harder, rattling it. The magnetic lock held firm with a solid, definitive thud. A confused silence fell over the crowd. Karen's smile faltered. She saw the new lock, then her eyes scanned up and found the sign. She read it once, then twice. Her face slowly turned from confusion to disbelief, then to a dark, mottled shade of red. Her party was on the other side of an impassable steel barrier, and I was standing on the other side, just watching. The quarterly HOA community meeting was her stage, and she played her part perfectly. Karen Stiles swept into the packed community clubhouse like a conquering hero returning from war. Her face was a mask of practiced concern, nodding gravely to her allies and offering thin, pitying smiles to those she considered beneath her. She'd spent the week since the disastrous gala spinning a frantic narrative of corporate espionage, portraying herself as the brave warrior defending the residents from a shadowy, hostile takeover. The room was tense. You could feel the divide. On one side sat her loyal followers, nodding along to her whispers. On the other sat the rest of us, the people who'd been fined, towed, or intimidated into silence. In the back row, a reporter from the local paper was taking notes, drawn in by the rumors of a community in chaos. Mike Travers had his phone set up on a small tripod, quietly recording. Everything was in place. Karen called the meeting to order with a bang of her gavel, launching into a long, self-pitying speech about outside agitators and unprecedented attacks on their peaceful community. She painted me as a disgruntled troublemaker trying to undermine the good work of the board. When she finished, she asked if there were any questions, her gaze sweeping the room with a clear challenge. Dare me. I stood up. I didn't shout or raise my voice. I just stood there holding a simple manila folder. Madam Vice President, I said, my voice calm and even, carrying easily across the silent room. My name is Jack Mullally. I'm not an outside agitator. I'm the man who built this community, and I'd like 5 minutes to correct the record. A murmur went through the crowd. Karen's eyes narrowed into slits. She couldn't refuse a homeowner the right to speak. Not with a reporter in the room. It would look too suspicious. Fine, she snapped, glancing at her watch. The board will grant Mr. Mallory 3 minutes. She thought she was still in control. I walked to the small lectern at the front of the room and opened my folder. I didn't look at her. I looked at my neighbors. I looked at Bill Anderson, the Marine she'd harassed over his flag. I looked at the Millers, who were still paying off the towing fees for their boat. For the past few months, I began, this community has been run on a foundation of lies. You've been told that your board has certain authorities. You've been told they control the marina. Today, I show you the truth. I held up the first paper. This is a receipt. 2 weeks ago, the mortgage on this property was bought. Not by a faceless corporation. By me. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Karen's face went white. I held up the second. This is a termination of lease, filed with the county. Their right to manage this property? It's void. Their power is an illusion. The crowd was now murmuring, looking at the board members. And this, I said, holding up the marina deed, has always been mine. Their common access rule was a lie, voted on by 2 people in a fake meeting. I let that sink in. Then I picked up the recorder. But don't take my word for it. Take hers. I pressed play. Karen's sneering voice filled the room. It doesn't matter what the old captain says. That's my marina now. I own that stupid yacht dock, and everyone knows it. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Bill Anderson stood up. You lied to us, he said, his voice quiet but filled with righteous fury. You used us. I think you owe us all an apology. And then you need to step down. Another voice shouted from the back. You stole our dues. And then another and another until the room was a chorus of outrage. Thief. Liar. Get out. Karen finally snapped. The mask of control shattered completely. You can't do this, she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. I am this HOA. This is my community. She grabbed a stack of papers from the table and hurled it into the crowd. Someone in the front row flinched back, and that's when it was over. Mike's recording was still running. The local reporter was scribbling furiously. Brad Kessler, the wannabe cop, just sat frozen in his chair, staring at the floor. 2 uniformed police officers who had been discreetly standing by the back door at my request stepped forward. When Karen shoved a resident who tried to calm her down, they moved in. Ma'am, you need to come with us, one of the officers said calmly. She struggled, screaming obscenities. As they escorted her out of the clubhouse, a wild, defeated animal being led away, she twisted her head and screamed back at me, her eyes filled with venom. This isn't over, old man. I looked at the 2 remaining board members who looked like they'd just seen a ghost. I picked up my folder from the lectern. Yes, I said, my voice clear and steady in the now quiet room. Yes, it is. A cornered animal is a dangerous animal, and Karen Stiles, stripped of her title and her public face, was fully cornered. Her public humiliation didn't chasten her. It made her reckless. She still believed on some fundamental level that the rules didn't apply to her. A week after the disastrous community meeting, my lawyer received a thick envelope. Inside was a cease and desist letter typed on what looked like a homemade letterhead for a non-existent law firm. It was full of bizarre legal-sounding gibberish accusing me of tortious interference and corporate malfeasance. My lawyer had a good laugh and filed it in the trash. But Karen's real last stand was even more pathetic. She tried to forge documents. She took an old marina access form, scanned it into her computer, and clumsily photoshopped my signature onto a line granting her perpetual and unrestricted access to all marina facilities. She then emailed this masterpiece of forgery to the police, the local newspaper, and Donna Chang at the management company, claiming it was proof of her legal standing. It took the newspaper in turn about 5 minutes to spot that the signature was pixelated and clearly doctored. The police just added it to the growing file they had on her. Her final desperate act was one of pure spite. She couldn't have the marina, so she decided nobody could. Late one night, the week after the meeting, the new security cameras I'd had Mike install picked up movement down at the docks. The footage was crystal clear. It showed Karen, dressed in dark clothing, trying to pry open the main breaker box that controlled the power to the boat lifts and dock lighting. She was trying to sabotage the entire electrical system. What she didn't know is that Mike Travers had his own routines. He often did a late-night walkthrough of the property, checking on his handiwork. He saw her before she saw him, a shadowy figure working away with a crowbar. He didn't confront her. He just quietly called the police. When the patrol car rolled up, its headlights catching her red-handed, the fight finally went out of her. Trespassing and attempted destruction of property were a lot harder to explain away than bogus bylaws. This time, she left in handcuffs. The fallout at the complex was swift and decisive. The remaining 2 board members, shaken and embarrassed, called an emergency session the very next day. With the video of Karen's arrest circulating among the residents, their decision was easy. They voted unanimously to remove her from the board in absentia and to suspend all HOA activities pending a full independent financial audit. Donna Chang from the management company sent a crisp formal email terminating their contract, citing gross negligence and potential criminal conduct by the board's representative. Their fake kingdom had officially crumbled. With the HOA neutralized, I could finally seek proper justice. I filed a civil suit against Karen Stiles personally. Not the HOA, just her, for the physical damage to my boat and the emotional distress caused to my granddaughter. It wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. The judge, presented with a mountain of evidence, including the forged documents and the arrest report, didn't hesitate. He ordered her to pay full restitution for the repairs to the Resolute and issued a permanent restraining order, banning her from setting foot anywhere on the property. Her house went up for sale a month later. The fear that had gripped the community lifted like a morning fog. People started talking to each other again. One by one, residents came to see me. Mr. Rodriguez, whose boat had been towed, shook my hand with both of his and thanked me for standing up when no one else would. Bill Anderson, the Marine, showed up at my door one evening with a small hand-carved wooden plaque. On it, a brass plate was engraved with the words "To Captain Jack, the man who took back the shore." I hung it in my study right next to my service commendations. It meant just as much. But the most important moment came on a sunny Saturday afternoon a few weeks later. The Resolute was finally back to her old self, her deck gleaming and her bright work shining. The faint smell of cheap perfume was long gone, replaced by the clean scent of lemon oil and salt air. Ellie was there with me. She walked along the deck, her small hand trailing along the newly repaired railing, her expression thoughtful and serious. The frail little girl who had hidden behind my leg was gone. In her place was a survivor, someone who had faced down monsters bigger than Karen Stiles and won. She stopped and looked out at the water, a peaceful, happy smile spreading across her face. "It's beautiful, Grandpa," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Can we go see the dolphins now?" I put my arm around her small shoulders and pulled her close, the warmth of the sun on our backs. "Yes, it is," I said, looking out at the calm blue water. "And it's ours again." With the storm past, the real work began. A power vacuum is a dangerous thing, and the last thing we wanted was for another HOA, another Karen, to rise from the ashes. We needed something different. So I called a meeting. Not an HOA meeting with rules and motions, but a simple gathering of neighbors in the clubhouse. We sat in a circle, no one at the head of the table. I laid out a proposal, not as a landlord, but as a fellow resident. I suggested we form a co-op, a simple democratically run organization of homeowners to manage the property ourselves. No third-party management company, no vice president of anything, just a small elected council of residents to handle the basics. Landscaping contracts, trash collection, and a shared maintenance fund. Mike Travers immediately volunteered to oversee anything electrical. Bill Anderson, the old Marine, offered to handle security oversight, organizing a simple neighborhood watch. The vote was unanimous. We were taking back control, not just from Karen, but from the whole broken system she represented. In the days that followed, a strange and wonderful thing happened. The fear was gone, and in its place, honesty began to grow. People who had been Karen's staunchest supporters started to emerge one by one, their faces a mixture of shame and relief. One woman who had been on the architectural committee that fined Bill for his flagpole knocked on my door with a freshly baked apple pie. "Jack," she said, looking at her shoes, "I'm so sorry." We were scared of her. If you said no to her, you became a target. It was easier to just go along. I accepted the pie. There was no victory in holding a grudge. The next day, one of the men from her inner circle, a guy who had always glared at me in the parking lot, spent his Saturday weeding and replanting the flower beds near the entrance. He didn't say a word to me. He just did the work. Even Brad Kessler, the tactical pants-wearing security wannabe, caught me by the mailboxes. He wasn't wearing his body cam. He just looked like a normal, defeated man. "Mr. Mullally," he mumbled. I got carried away. "I apologize." I just nodded. The humiliation of being so utterly wrong was punishment enough. Our first act as a co-op was to undo the damage. We put up new signs at the marina entrance, simple and clear. Private property. Resident and guest access only. We rewrote the marina lease agreements to be straightforward, single-page documents without any confusing legal jargon. The liability insurance, which had been a nightmare under the HOA, suddenly became much more affordable. The insurance agent was thrilled to be dealing with a competent owner-operated entity instead of a road board. Every change we made was about simplifying, about bringing things back to common sense. We weren't trying to build a new kingdom. We were just trying to be good neighbors. We set up a transparent online portal where every resident could see exactly where every dollar of our shared maintenance fund was going. No more secret meetings, no more bogus votes. About a month into this new calm, I took a walk down to the marina. The sun was warm and the water was like glass. I stopped at the head of the main pier, the very spot where Karen had held her disastrous yoga classes. It was quiet now, peaceful. I'd ordered a small custom-made brass plaque. It wasn't large or fancy, just simple block letters. I knelt down and fixed it to the first piling right where anyone coming down the dock would see it. It read Anna's Pier, in memory of Anna Mullally, who loved the shore. My wife. She had poured her heart into this place. It felt right that her name would be the first thing people saw. A quiet guardian watching over the water she loved. Ellie came down to see it that weekend. She traced the letters of her grandmother's name with her finger. "Grandma would have liked this," she said softly. "She would have liked that it's quiet again." That evening, we held our first official community event. It wasn't a gala. It was a fish fry. Mike Travers manned a huge grill, turning out perfectly cooked red fish. Bill Anderson held court with a group of kids, telling them old sea stories that were probably only half true. The Rodriguez family brought a huge cooler of drinks, and the Millers, their boat safely back in its slip, set up a table of desserts. There were no caterers, no clipboards, no pretense. It was just us, the electricians, the veterans, the nurses, the retirees, sharing a meal on the shore we all called home. Laughter echoed across the water, a sound I hadn't realized how much I'd missed. I stood back for a moment, watching my granddaughter show her friends the new plaque, and felt a profound sense of peace. Funny thing about storms. They roar and they rage and they do their damage, but in the end, they always pass. And when the water is calm again, they show you who's anchored and who's just floating.